This is Freedom Investor Radio, and I'm John Pearl. It hit me like a freight train when I realized there was a better way. When I discovered that I could take my future into my own hands. When I realized I could invest my way to freedom. This is what I'm working towards. In each episode of Freedom Investor Radio, we will explore the tactics and strategies used by the top real estate investors and entrepreneurs in the nation. We will learn how you can start investing your way to freedom and take control of your life. Thanks so much for tuning in. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Freedom Investor Radio. I'm your host, John Pearl, and today I am joined by Gina Shin, who is a managing partner of Shin Equity Partners. So Gina, welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me, John. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. So Gina and I connected on LinkedIn, and I get asked a lot where I find guests to be on my show, and half the time my answer is on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn at one point was just a platform, for me at least, where I put my resume and I thought something was just going to magically happen. I was going to get all these amazing opportunities, which it can be useful for that. But for about the past year, I've been using it like an online 24/7 business networking platform. And that's how Gina and I got connected. So Gina, I'm going to pass it over to you. Why don't you give us a quick high-level overview of what it is that you do now and the story of how you got there?
Sure. As of right now, I'm a multifamily syndicator. Up till now, we have been focusing on the C-class value add type of properties. And so we have about 300 units, about $30 million of assets under management in 3 states. But right now, I'm trying to pivot my focus into more of the Arizona and the Texas market. Next year, I have a partner and we're kind of in the works of maybe talking about potentially looking in the development space. It's been an interesting and a really fun progress, just this journey of being in this space. And so my background is in mortgage lending on the residential side. I was in that space for about 10 years, still dabbling on the side. And essentially, that's how my interest with real estate really started. And that's when it took off. So I used to work for this company where a good handful of the clientele, they were high net worth individuals. They were developers, they were investors, people with high W-2 salary jobs with a large portfolio of real estate. And so I would spend a large portion of my day studying their tax returns, trying to figure out how do we get these people a loan when all their numbers seem to indicate that they make no money. And so my boss at the time, he introduced this concept of like paper losses, right? Like I still had no idea what that meant. I was like, it's very abstract. It's very imaginary. I don't understand how you have this imaginary loss. I don't know what that means, but it really started that process of shifting my mindset. So my boss was a huge proponent and a really big part in that, where he would tell me, Gina, you don't want to be a W-2 wage earner. That's not your goal. Where you need to be is you need to be self-employed. You need to be investing in real estate. You need to have diversified income streams, right? So that he really pounded that into my brain. And I was like, sure, that sounds cool, but not really understanding the weight of what he was saying. And I'm serious. He like had an Amazon store. He had rental properties in Arizona. He did mortgage lending. He did there were several different things that he did. And I thought he was crazy. It's like, you're stretching yourself thin. You have all this stuff that you're doing. I don't even know how you're keeping track of it. You're like, what's the point? You're getting $1,000 here, a couple thousand here, $500 here. I don't know what you're doing. And so eventually I kind of had a wake up call and I realized, oh, he's right. This is what we should be doing.
Yeah. So it sounds like you were very lucky to have somebody like that in your life, because most people don't, and including myself. And I had to come across this discovery myself. So it sounds like he was indirectly teaching you about the cash flow quadrant, Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant. You're either an employee, self-employed, or you're a business owner, an investor, the left and the right side, and you want to be on the right side. So you talked about multiple streams of, which is great. Most millionaires you'll see have multiple streams of income. But I want to go back to, so you were looking at people's tax returns and it was turning the light bulb on. And so that kind of shifted your thinking to start getting into the real estate. So when did you actually pivot into the real estate investing?
Yeah, so it took a while. It took a pretty long time. Being in the mortgage industry, there's I mean, with any job, right? It takes time, right, to get to a point where you have lots of disposable income. And for me, it also coincided with me understanding how to negotiate my pay. That took quite a bit of time to figure that out for myself, right? Like, how do I get paid on commission? How much commission do I need to make? All of those things work together. But eventually, I got to a point where I was making pretty good money. And of course, I was working crazy hours. And as time went on and as I progressed in the industry, the rates were getting better and better. And then COVID happened, and then everything was just crazy. It was just absolute insanity. Every single person on this planet was refinancing their houses, right? And I was just like, okay, we'll go with it. If I need to work 100 hours, I'm going to work 100 hours. The business is here, and everyone that was older than me, and even my own personal observations, everyone's like, this is a once in a lifetime event. We're never going to have this again. This is the perfect storm. There's so much equity. The rates are so low. Everyone needs these loans. And so I took that to heart, worked insane hours, and amassed a bunch of capital. And my observation from just being in the industry, I wasn't a part of the industry when '08 happened. I didn't see any of that firsthand. I saw indirectly. My parents actually had to short sale their home. So I did see that, but not from an industry perspective. And what I noticed, and from what I heard from older like mentor figures to me, was it was so bad when it happened. Apparently, there were several people, a couple of people that I knew personally, where they did not have the reserves and the capital to pay their bills, and they had to liquidate their 401ks just to survive and to float themselves. And as a result, some of those people no longer really have a nest egg for retirement. But the same people were living it up with the COVID money. They were buying $2 million houses. They were upgrading their cars. They were going on vacations. And I believe in treating yourself for your hard work. I think that is absolutely essential. And I think it's necessary. I told my husband, I was like, dude, we can't do that. We did buy a house, but we were like, let's buy the cheapest house that fits our criteria. It doesn't have to be fancy. We barely even have a backyard, and we have two big dogs that hate us for it, but it's fine. We wanted to put our money into something that was going to grow. Ideally, if it produced income, then that would be even better. But really, we wanted to make sure we were at the very least putting it away so it would grow and become a really good source of income down the line, or so we could either retire early or we could just keep working and then have a great nest egg when we do get to retirement age. So that's when I decided we really need to proceed with these things and not just have it be an idea, but to actualize it now. And so I was still really busy with work, and my husband doesn't really have an interest in real estate. He likes the idea, right? You go out, you can make the money, I'll reap the benefits. Cool story, bro. That's kind of his tagline. And that's what we did. And I was like, I'm too busy. Sorry, I'm still working 100 hours a week. I'm not going to go fly to the Midwest and meet a bunch of agents and tour houses and look at neighborhoods and meet contract. Like, I was like, burst strategy sounds cool, but I'm not going to do that. I don't have the time or the capacity, or I just, no, it's not for me at the moment. I heard about commercial assets. I had heard about it for a while. I was really scared to jump into it. I didn't know, like, how do you do it? How do you figure it out? It seems like this really scary asset class, and found out about mentorship programs. And even that scared me because I was like, how do you know if it's a good mentor? This is a lot of money. How do you know it's not like a scam? How do you know it's legit and they're gonna get to where you need to get to? Yeah, after a lot of debate, I did eventually join a mentorship program, and through that, I was able to join my first couple of deals, was able to put in my own money, raise some money, and that's how I got started in the syndication game, was through that program.
Excellent. So you jumped straight in, you bypassed the single family stuff altogether. Similar to
Yeah.
myself, I never, other than the house we own, our personal residence, never got into the single family stuff. Did you start investing passively in syndications, or you just jumped right in with the mentorship onto the GP
Yeah.
admin side? That's
Yeah,
amazing.
I was a passive investor in my own deal.
Nice. That's great. So what was the process like? I know some people, there's the argument mentorship versus, hey, that's a waste of money. Just invest that money. Tell me your thoughts about that.
I think it can work either way. I know people that have gone both routes. I think there are definitely pros and cons to each one. I think that for myself, working the hours that I was working, it just wasn't to go the non-mentorship route. For me, it just made the most sense, right? If I wanted to, I guess in theory, I could have just amassed the capital, waited until that basically the beginning of this year when the COVID interest rates disappeared, and then I guess I could have found partners and started maybe JVing the smaller, maybe a 10 unit, and then scale up from there. I know people that have been wildly successful with that are making crazy amounts of money. And eventually they do go into syndications. And I think that is wonderful. For me at the time, I really wanted to consider the time value of money. I didn't want to wait until whenever this magical interest rate run was going to be over. There was a lot of speculation at the time that yes, interest rates are going to go up, but a lot of people thought it was going to be a gradual increase. We didn't think it was going to be what we've experienced in this last year. And so the income and the work and everything will just taper off. So if I'm working, let's say 100 hours a week last year, then maybe this year I'll work 80 hours a week and then maybe 60. I thought it was going to be a gradual step down. And as a result, I still thought like, how much time has to pass before I'm going to have enough time to be able to start from the ground up and start with these smaller units and then the bigger ones, and then the bigger ones from there on out. So for me, I just wanted to go ahead and jump in to this mentorship program and have someone just tell me, cut through that, all the personal struggles that I might have to go through. And for me, it made sense for me personally.
Yeah, likewise. That's very similar to my experience with commercial real estate. So let's talk a little bit about the first deal and the fact that this was your first deal, and you said you were raising some capital for the deal, bringing in some other passive investors. What was your process like with the deal and convincing people to invest? I found that even when you think somebody, or even if you know how much money somebody is making, so many people are just not good with their money. Like you were saying earlier, they just have poor spending habits, or their knowledge of investing assets versus liabilities, it's just not there. So it can be challenging to find people that are even interested or have the means to invest in these assets. So what was that experience like?
So it's funny that you ask. So the very first deal that I was a part of, I brought in all the capital for that GP position. And it ended up being a good thing because the way that when I reflect on it, I'm like, oh, it's probably better that I was the guinea pig because frankly, I didn't know a whole lot, right? I was learning, I was going through the motions and I was absorbing what I could when I could. But the reality is I wasn't. It's like let's say, how many conferences have you gone to? How much have you networked? How much, all of the stuff that just comes naturally with that growth and the knowledge. I actually didn't really do a whole lot of that. So it actually ended up, in hindsight, it was a good thing. But I did start the process of trying to raise capital at that time. And it was really hard. I was thinking, hey, if I have the money, all these other people have the money too, right? And I'm like, hey guys, this thing is awesome. You should just let's invest. Don't you want to do real estate? Don't you want to have this passive income? Like, we see people's tax returns all the time. We know that the money's in real estate. We know that the tax benefits are in real estate. So let's just do it. Right. And then everyone looks at you like you're crazy because they're like, I'm sorry, what? Who are you? Have you done in this space? you want how much money or what kind of asset and how many millions of dollars are you paying for this? And how, like, all the questions of the natural skepticism that ensued from that you could expect when someone out of nowhere comes and says, hey, I want 50 grand from you.
Yeah, I think back to when I was first, but before I started reading all about real estate investing and financial education and that stuff, like this would have sounded crazy to me also. Keeping that into perspective is,
Right.
I think, is important also, but sorry to interrupt.
Oh no, that's okay. I was just gonna say, to your point, it's also the like the it sounds too good to be true, right? Because you're going over like the pro forma and you're like, hey, you're gonna maybe 2x your money in a certain time frame. And they're like, what? Like, this is too good to be true. This is not real. I think you're getting, like, I think you fell into a Ponzi scheme and you don't even realize it. All the objections. And because a lot of my friends are very analytical, right? They're like, dude, show me the proof. I want to see you go through this. I want to see you blah, blah, blah. Like all the hurdles that they set aside from me. And after that, I started talking to people who were good at raising money, right? Trying to figure out, okay, so how do you really do this? Like, how do people go out and raise millions of dollars, right? Like, you hear the stories of people that have raised like tens of millions of dollars in like a week span. And I'm like, they must be really rich. They must have like family money, like their aunt, every single one of their aunts must be like, here's 2 million. So it's been a really interesting learning process. And that process of expanding and finding a way to be able to raise money, that's actually how we met, right? That was part of the reason why I started getting active on LinkedIn, was to meet people that were outside of my immediate circle, people that I realized over time that my immediate, like in my inherited group, my friends and family, they certainly have an interest in real estate, very intrigued by it, but right now they are not ready. Most of them, they're not really in a place where we'll say, like, mentally or even emotionally, they're just not ready to let go of that money. Or they still want the control. They want have the analysis paralysis. And so I had to eventually pivot. One of my mentors told me, he said, Gina, for you to really grow, for you to really want to hit that next level, you need to start reaching out to people that you didn't go to college with, people you didn't grow up with. You need to meet new people. You need to network with these people who are in a place where they're more ready to take that step towards investing. And so that's when I got turned on to LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I've found in different masterminds and coaching groups that I'm in is, and with my own experience, like you have these goals and you're like, oh yeah, this guy just went out and raised 3 million, so I can go out and raise 1.5 million for this deal, no problem. That's not exactly the case. Turns out that person's been doing this for 10 years and has a vast network of people who know and trust him. So it does definitely takes time. So I think in this business, it's important to expand your time horizon and think really long term. Talk about asset classes real quick. So you
Sure.
mentioned you're into the C class value add space. So for those that are unaware, it goes A class, B class, C class, D class. A class being the best, the new builds, luxury type living. D class being neglected, rundown areas. Heard them referred to as war zones in the past. But the C class, value add, working class housing, there's a lot of potential value to be added. So can you tell us about your business models that you employ in those assets?
Yeah, so a lot of these properties are mostly what we call in classic units or classic condition, right? Let's say it's like a 60s or 70s build. A lot of the finishes may be pretty old. It basically comes from the time period of when they were built originally. And we like to refer that as like having meat on the bone, right? We're like, okay, if we take this particular unit and if we put a certain amount of money in to upgrade it, maybe $6,000 or $7,000, let's say, per unit of interior renovation spend, like what can we charge for rents at that point, and what is that going to look like for our bottom line and our revenue projections, and also our the value of the property as well. That's just like a very simplified thing, right? There's the physical appearance and the physical changes that we will do, right? Maybe deferred maintenance, bringing the units to a little bit more of a modern condition, maybe amenities may be lacking. There's certain properties where there will be large untapped like spaces of just land, right? Maybe in like the corner of a property or something where you're like, I could do something with that. I could build a dog park. I could put a playground for the kids. I could put a storage unit. Or there's so many different things that you could do. And just trying to figure out in this market, are these potential ideas, are they going to be the things that the people want? Are they going to be things that they can use and enjoy and potentially pay for those particular amenities? Also, operationally, right? There are certain properties where they may be run by mom and pop operators. So maybe someone who purchased the property a very long time ago, or maybe they were the original builders and they have just kept that property in their family, raised rents whenever they wanted to, however much they wanted to. It may not have kept up with the market. They may be doing the self-management themselves. I feel like that's like a holy grail kind of a property. And for things like that, there's so much you can do just to optimize the operations on that. So the last property that we closed, it was in Phoenix, and it was actually a very similar type of scenario where 90% of the units were in classic condition. The market rents were significantly higher than where they were at when we purchased it. It was the in-place rents were almost 50% of where the market was at. And the other income that we can charge, right? In many cases, right, when you apply for rental at an apartment, you might have to pay for application fees, right? Pet deposits, pet rent on a monthly basis. In certain cases, you may even pay a specific extra dollar amount that goes towards your utilities, the prorated amount for your particular unit for how much you spend, like those kinds of things. A lot of that was actually not being charged. Basically, other than laundry income, everything else was missing. And so there was so much potential to be had with that property. And so we went through this process and we're still going through it. It's only been 2 months since we've acquired it, but we have been increasing the rents and we have been working with the tenants to basically improve that property, right? It's not just about the money, it's about keeping a quality of life for them as well. And we have seen so far, we've seen very good feedback, right? So out of the units that we have actually renewed leases for, over 90% of the residents, they're opting to stay, even if they're paying a good amount higher than what they were paying before. They love the asset, they love the property, they love the location. They still know that rents are a little bit cheaper than where they might get elsewhere. And maybe more importantly, they really love our property manager. They have a very special bond, even though it hasn't been that long since they started working with them. That's, I guess, like an example of how we can add value to a property like that.
That's great. And the beauty of syndication, what we're talking about here, the commercial real estate, is that you can experience the benefits as a passive investor. You can work with Gina and her team. They're out doing the work to find these deals. And if you're somebody who's got a job, is busy, owns a business, you have money to invest, you love the idea of tax benefits, cash flow, appreciation, you don't have to do the work. You could get in contact with someone like Gina and experience these benefits. So Gina, before we get into our last question, I just got one more about the actual real estate stuff itself. So you mentioned you were interested in development potentially, and I've heard a lot about that recently. How is the lending environment or the overall macro environment impacting different aspects of value add investing, and why move into development?
There's a lot of things, right? Interest rates are still higher than they were before, right? I think a lot of operators had been purchasing these assets when lending was still very cheap, right? So they were able to purchase it for aggressive purchase prices, essentially. And I think as some people are coming out and are close to maturity for their bridge debt, for their short-term loan, they need to get out of that loan, right? Either they're going to refinance into a long-term debt, or they're going to refinance potentially into another bridge product, or they're going to sell. And I think what's happening is they need a certain amount of money to sell. But with us being in the rate environment that we are now, we may not be able to offer as much in order for us to make the returns that we need to make. And it's a little bit more challenging finding deals right now. There's a gap of expectation that still has yet to be fully reconciled. And so I'm sure with time, we'll get to that point. So that's definitely one thing in the value C or in the class C properties, the value add properties that I've been investing in. There's also an affordability issue too, right? Income is not increasing at the rate that the rent and inflation and everything else is increasing. And so that's causing a little bit of a difficulty too, right? Can we make the numbers work with the prices of assets right now if we cannot really push the rents? It's a numbers game, right? Can it work for everyone? And I feel like it's just much more challenging to make things work. And then I had considered maybe we'll just pivot into class Bs. I've heard many people talk about a flight to quality anyway, even our residents, if they're going to pay that much money, they want a nicer place to live, essentially. And there's a lot of things going on, but I feel like some class A operators are going to class B, and then class C operators are going to class B. So that's also causing a lot of strain on the competition. And personally, I've just been interested in the development space before. Also, before I started investing in commercial assets, I actually worked part-time on top of my mortgage stuff. I was working part-time with a local developer in San Diego because I wanted to learn about it. But development in California is a train wreck. So all of these things, it's just a personal interest of mine. I feel like potentially there could be more meat on the bone. Obviously, with the way that inflation is going, the cost of materials and supply and labor is also causing a constraint on the new development space as well. But I have been looking into different potential niche products where it could still make sense, right? There are certain areas, certain programs where they'll help you offset your property taxes in certain, if it's like affordable housing in certain cases. It's really fascinating digging into it, seeing the different ways that the local community is willing to work with developers in order to get the kind of product that they are looking for in that neighborhood. So I'm still learning and discovering things, and I'm still kind of networking and trying to figure out what that pivot is going to look like. But that's just like a high level overview of what I've been noticing with respect to purchasing an already built property versus like the new build space.
Yeah, definitely. And we're extremely short on housing right now. So development definitely solves the problem. And you're exactly right. Local governments will incentivize certain types of builds. And if you're solving a problem, they're going to help you make the process easier. All right. So I've got one last question that I ask all of my guests. As a quick background, I work about 4.5 hours up the coast from you at the Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant. It's currently set to shut down in the next few years. So my mission is to replace my W-2 income with income from real estate investing. So what's your one piece of advice you would offer to folks who are in a similar boat, who are looking to escape the W-2 world via real estate or entrepreneurship?
I would say that one size does not fit all for each person, right? That's something that I learned from my boss, right? He had an Amazon store. I don't have an Amazon store, right? He purchased townhouses in Phoenix for cash. I did not. And as I've been networking with all these amazing people, hearing about all the different ways they've generated passive income, I think that the one piece of advice would be to do just that, would be to network, because you will be amazed at the things that people are able to do in order to escape that W-2 lifestyle. I obviously toot real estate because that's what I do, but some people, if you're just not comfortable with it, there's so many other ways you can do it. And I have a good friend of mine, and she always harps on me for doing too much. And she's always like, why don't you hire that out? Why don't you get a VA? Why don't you systematize things? So that's actually something personally that I'm in the process of doing. But I found that there are so many things that you can do and utilize different people to help you with your business in order to make that more passive for you. Or maybe you want to do it yourself and build up that business. But if you make it passive, you can do that alongside your job. You can have your W-2 job and you can watch that grow. And then maybe at some point you're like, I can keep doing that. And I think that is just really fascinating. And really, a lot of that, it just comes with the research and networking, because at the end of the day, we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such good advice. One size does not fit all. There is a way, though, for everybody to get there eventually. All right, Gina, what's a good way that people can get in touch with you if they want to reach out?
Yeah, so can definitely go to my website. That is shinequitypartners.com. You can reach me on LinkedIn. I've been a little bit more active on there. My name is Gina Lynette Shin. It's very important to put that middle name in there because Asian people seriously all have the same name. Gina Lynette Shin. There should only be one of me in the world. I also recently started an Instagram. It's still kind of in the growth stages, but that handle is Invest with Gina. So all of those different ways should be a pretty easy way to get in touch with me.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, Gina Shin, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Freedom Investor Radio. If you like what you heard, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share with a friend. Thanks again for listening.